She cheated with my best friend, then stole $250, $0 in our divorce, only to discover he was secretly my half-brother the entire time, and now we're fighting over the estate he left me. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here telling a story like this, but life has a funny way of shoving you into the most unexpected situations. One day, everything seemed fine. Well, at least as normal as it ever was with my wife, Lisa. We'd been married for 8 years, and I thought we had a good life. She was sharp, bitchy at times, but I loved her, or at least I thought I did. Then out of nowhere, I started noticing little things. She'd be on her phone more than usual, hiding her screen when I walked into the room. She'd get defensive when I'd ask about who she was texting, and she'd suddenly be busy when I wanted to talk about our finances. Our conversations became strained, and I could feel a wall building between us. Still, I convinced myself it was just stress, work, the kids, the usual chaos. But then one night I came home early from work. I wasn't feeling great, and I thought I'd surprise her. I opened the door and immediately knew something was off. The living room was too quiet and her purse was on the sofa. I called her name, and that's when I heard it, moaning coming from our bedroom. My heart stopped. I froze, my mind racing. I crept closer, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. It was her voice, definitely Lisa's, but the sounds weren't just talking. They were sex noises. I peeked inside and saw her with my best friend, Jake. They were tangled together, kissing and clearly into each other. I couldn't believe it. My mind went blank. How long had this been going on? Was I just blind? I felt a surge of rage, confusion, and disbelief all at once. I wanted to yell, to confront her right then and there, but I just stood there watching, trying to process what I was seeing. The worst part was I'd trusted Lisa completely. She was bitchy, yes, but she was loyal. Or so I thought. Seeing her with Jake, who I'd known since college, was like a punch in the gut. I wasn't just betrayed. My entire world was shattering. I quietly backed out of the room, trying to hold myself together, and left the house without saying a word. I couldn't even look at her. I didn't want her to see the tears I was fighting back. The days that followed were a blur. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. I kept going over everything in my head, how she could do this, how I missed the signs, how I had been so blind. I started digging into her phone, secretly of course, and found messages between her and Jake that confirmed what I saw. There were flirtatious texts, plans to meet up, even explicit messages about their sexcapades. I found out she'd been lying about her whereabouts for months, sneaking around, hiding the affair from me. What made it worse was the way she spun her lies. She told me she was just stressed, that she loved me but was confused, that it was nothing serious. She called me paranoid, accused me of overreacting, said I was accusing her of things she didn't do. Her tone was bitchy, dismissive, like I was the one in the wrong. She never took responsibility. Instead, she kept spinning her web of lies, trying to convince me I was overreacting. But I knew better. I had proof now, and I felt like my world was crumbling piece by piece. And then came the money. She'd been asking for more cash lately, claiming bills were higher than usual and that she needed it for urgent things. I was suspicious but didn't think much of it until I found out she'd taken $250, $0 from our joint account, money I'd worked hard for, money we'd planned to use for our kids' college fund, for a new house, for our future. Turns out she'd been siphoning off money to fund her secret life with Jake. I was furious. How could she do that? How could she betray me, our family, and then steal from us? All of this hit me like a freight train. I was angry, devastated, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. I couldn't believe I'd trusted her all these years, only to find out she'd been lying, cheating, stealing. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what yet. All I knew was that I was done being the naive husband. I was going to find out everything, and I was going to make her pay. That's when I started planning my next move. I didn't want her to walk all over me anymore. I was going to take everything she'd taken from me, my wife, my money, my peace of mind, and I was going to make sure she paid for it. But I also knew I had to be smart about it. This wasn't just about anger anymore. It was about justice. And I was determined to get it. After I uncovered everything, I realized I couldn't just confront Lisa blindly. That wouldn't get me the answers I needed, and honestly I was too furious to think straight. I had to be strategic. First, I needed to gather all the evidence, texts, bank statements, proof of her affair with Jake and the money she'd stolen. I started digging into our bank accounts, and what I found was staggering. She drained $250,000, and she'd done it slowly over the past year, hiding it in offshore accounts, fake transactions, and shell companies. I couldn't believe she'd gone this far. I'd always thought she was bitchy but loyal. Turns out she was a master manipulator. I knew I had to keep my cool, even if inside I was burning with rage. So I started working with a lawyer quietly behind her back. I wanted to build a case, not just for the money but for everything she'd done. In the process, I also hired a private investigator. I needed to know how deep this went. Turns out, Lisa had been planning to leave me for Jake for months. They'd even talked about running away together, starting fresh somewhere else. She had been telling me she was stressed at work, but she was actually planning her escape with Jake's help. The affair wasn't just a fling, it was a full-blown partnership in betrayal. I felt like I'd been played from every angle. While all this was happening, Lisa kept up her act. She'd be bitchy, dismissive, calling me paranoid whenever I brought up her lies. She'd tell me I was overreacting, that I was just jealous or insecure. She'd spin stories about how she loved me but was just confused, that she needed space, that I was being unreasonable. Every time she did that, I felt the cold anger rising again. How dare she accuse me of being insecure? She was the one sneaking around, lying, stealing from us, and then trying to turn it around on me. Then there was the confrontation I wasn't ready for. I decided I had to face her. One evening I told her I wanted to talk, that I had found some things that needed explaining. She looked at me with that bitchy smirk, and I could see the defiance in her eyes. She tried to deny everything at first, saying I must have misunderstood or that someone else was spreading rumors. But I laid out the evidence, screenshots of texts, bank statements, the offshore account details. Her face drained of color, and for a moment I saw the panic behind her eyes. She snapped back with her usual lies. "You're crazy," she spat. "You're just jealous because Jake is better in bed than you ever were. You're insecure, and you're making this all up because you're afraid of losing your precious money." Her words stung. She was so bitchy, so dismissive, like I was just some obstacle in her new life. But I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I told her I knew everything, that I had all the proof, and that she was done lying to me. Her reaction was priceless. She tried to act innocent, like she was the victim. She started crying fake tears, claiming she made a mistake, that she loved me, and that she never meant for things to get this far. But her words didn't match her actions. I saw the cold calculation in her eyes. She knew she was caught, and she was trying to spin her way out of it. I felt a strange mixture of sadness and rage. I'd loved her, I'd trusted her, and now I was faced with the harsh reality that she'd been deceiving me for months, maybe longer. That night I lay awake, thinking about everything. About the woman I thought I knew, about the money she'd stolen, about Jake, the friend I'd trusted. I felt like I was in a nightmare. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to try to save what was left of our marriage. But another part, deep down, knew that trust was broken beyond repair. She'd betrayed me, lied to my face, and stolen from me. How could I ever look at her the same way again? I also started reflecting on the bigger picture, what I was going to do next. I couldn't just let her walk away with everything. I had to fight for my rights, for the money she stole, and for my dignity. That's when I decided I would file for divorce, but with a twist. I wasn't just going to walk away, I was going to make sure she paid for her betrayal. I'd take her to court, expose her to everyone, and reclaim what was rightfully mine, both the money and the respect. I knew this was only the beginning. The next steps would be messy, emotional, and probably ugly. But I was done being the naive husband. I was done being the one who got played. From now on, I'd be the one in control. And if she thought she could cheat and steal her way out of this, she had another thing coming. After I made the decision to go through with the divorce, my entire focus shifted. I couldn't just confront Lisa and hope she'd come clean. No, I needed airtight evidence, a solid plan, and a way to ensure I got what was mine, everything she had taken, and some measure of justice for. The betrayal. The first thing I did was hire a forensic accountant, someone who could track every dollar she'd taken, every offshore account, every shell company she'd set up. Turns out she'd been funneling money into various accounts under fake names for months, all to hide her theft. I couldn't believe how deep the rabbit hole went. She'd been planning her escape, not just emotionally but financially. She wanted to disappear with my money and start fresh with Jake, who, by the way, I later found out was more than just her affair partner. He was actually my half-brother. That revelation hit me like a punch to the stomach. I found out that Lisa and Jake had known about our relationship long before I did. They'd been conspiring, and she'd even introduced him to our family at one point, pretending he was just a friend. I was stunned. The fact that she'd kept that secret, that she'd been lying to me about everything, including my own blood relative, made my blood boil. Meanwhile, I started gathering witnesses. Friends, family, anyone who might have seen or suspected something. I knew Lisa was a manipulator, but I wanted her to see I wasn't going to be played anymore. I also secretly installed cameras and kept detailed records of her movements. I wasn't going to let her get away with anything. I was planning to make her pay, and I wanted every piece of evidence ready for when I filed. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got. She'd been telling me she was working late, at the gym, or meeting with her sister when in reality she was with Jake. They'd been sneaking around in hotels, in her car, even at her parents' house. She lied about everything, and her lies got uglier by the day. I found explicit texts, messages about their sexcapades, plans to run away together, even detailed discussions about how she'd take the money and leave me with nothing. One of the most shocking discoveries was a set of bank transfers, large sums of money transferred just days before I found out. I traced them back to her offshore accounts. She'd been draining our savings, our retirement, everything. It was like she was planning a new life, one where I wouldn't have a say, wouldn't get a dime. The betrayal was beyond anything I ever expected. I also found out that she'd been lying about her stress and needing space. She told friends she was trying to find herself, but in reality she was planning her escape with Jake. I even found out she'd been secretly talking to lawyers, trying to figure out how to shield her assets. She was preparing for the possibility that I'd find out, and she wanted to be ready to cut her losses. All of this was a lot to process. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I had loved her, cared for her, and believed in our marriage. Now I saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, dishonest, selfish woman who'd used me for her own gain. I kept asking myself, how could she do this? How could she lie so much? How could she steal from me and then pretend everything was fine? In the midst of all this, I started planning my next move. I knew I had enough evidence to file for divorce, but I also wanted to go after the money she stole. I wanted to expose her lies publicly, to show everyone what kind of person she really was. I also knew I had to be careful. She was bitchy, vindictive, and would probably try to turn everything around on me if she could. So I prepared my case meticulously. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in high-net-worth divorce and financial crimes. I sat down with him, laid out everything I'd uncovered, and mapped out a strategy. I was going to fight her for custody of the kids, but I also wanted full financial accountability. I wanted the court to see her true nature, how she'd lied, cheated, and stolen from us. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act, acting innocent in front of friends and family, pretending she was the victim, crying fake tears and blaming me for being paranoid. But I knew better. I had the evidence, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Every lie she told, every sneaky move she made, only strengthened my resolve. The biggest shock came when I found out that she'd been planning to leave the country with Jake and the money. She'd already booked tickets, arranged for a new identity, and had a stash of cash hidden away. That was the moment I realized I had to act fast. I contacted the authorities, froze her accounts, and started the legal process to prevent her from fleeing. I wasn't just fighting for my money. I was fighting for my life, for my reputation, and for the truth. I had trusted her for years, and she'd turned out to be the biggest betrayal of all. I knew the road ahead was going to be rough, but I was ready. I'd face whatever came next because I refused to let her destroy everything I'd worked for and everything I still deserved. The legal battle escalated faster than I expected once I involved the authorities. I was able to freeze her accounts just in time. She was planning to leave the country within days, maybe hours, with Jake and the stolen money. That was the turning point. I watched her panic for the first time, her bitchy facade cracking just enough for me to see how scared she was. She tried to spin it, of course, screaming about how I was ruining her life, how I was a jealous, paranoid husband, but her words rang hollow. I had all the proof I needed now, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this one. The court process was brutal. Lisa, with her bitchy attitude, tried every trick in the book to delay, deny, and distract. She hired her own lawyer, who was just as manipulative as she was, and they threw everything they had at me: accusations of emotional abuse, claims that I was controlling, even trying to turn the kids against me. But I had the evidence: texts, bank statements, witness testimonies, and I made sure the court saw it all. I wanted her to be exposed for the lying, stealing cheater she was. Meanwhile, I kept digging into her financial dealings. I discovered that she'd been funneling money into offshore accounts, shell corporations, and even purchasing real estate under fake names. It was clear she was trying to hide assets, but I had enough to prove she committed fraud. I worked with my lawyer to prepare a comprehensive case for financial misconduct, and I pushed for full transparency. I wanted her to pay back every dollar she'd stolen, and I wanted her to lose everything she'd built on lies. The emotional toll was immense. I felt betrayed on every level: by her, by Jake, even by my own trust. I kept replaying the moments when I'd loved her, when I'd thought we had a future. Now I saw her for what she was: a manipulative, selfish woman who'd used me, lied to me, and stolen from our family. It was hard to accept, but I knew I had to move forward. I couldn't let her destroy me entirely. I had to fight for my dignity, my kids, and what was rightfully mine. One of the most shocking revelations during the court proceedings was discovering that Jake was actually my half-brother. I had always known he was close, but I never suspected the truth: our fathers had been brothers. That revelation turned everything upside down. It made the betrayal even worse. Not only had Lisa cheated on me, but she'd also been secretly involved with someone who was related to me by blood. The thought made my stomach churn. How deep did this go? Was there more I didn't know? It was a lot to process, and I felt like my world was collapsing all over again. Despite the chaos, I stayed focused. I wanted justice. I wanted to strip her of her lies and her stolen money and show everyone what she truly was: a liar, a thief, and a manipulator. I pushed for full custody of the kids, knowing that her bitchy attitude and lies wouldn't be good for them. I also insisted on a forensic audit of her finances, demanding she account for every cent she'd stolen or hidden. The court finally ruled in my favor, awarding me custody of the kids and ordering her to return the stolen money. It was a long, exhausting battle, but I felt a sense of relief. At least now, I could start the process of rebuilding my life. The court also ordered her to pay damages for the fraud and theft, which was a small victory but a significant one. I wanted her to understand that her actions had consequences. Throughout it all, I couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of anger and sadness. I was angry that I'd been played, betrayed by someone I loved. But I was also sad because I'd lost the woman I thought I knew, the woman I'd trusted with everything. I wondered how I could have missed the signs, how I'd been so blind to her true nature. Still, I knew I had to move on. Staying stuck in anger wouldn't do me any good. I had to focus on healing, on protecting my kids, and on making sure this never happened again. In the end, I realized that this experience had changed me forever. It taught me to be more cautious, more aware, and to never take trust for granted. I learned that some people are capable of incredible deception, and that sometimes you have to fight hard to get what's rightfully yours. I still have scars, but I also have a sense of closure. I know I did everything I could to stand up for myself and my family, and I hope anyone else going through something similar learns that you're stronger than you think, especially when you're forced to face the worst. The aftermath of the court victory wasn't exactly what I expected. Sure, I got the ruling I fought so hard for: custody of the kids, the return of the stolen money, and her being held accountable for the fraud. But even with all that, I felt hollow. The house was eerily silent, and every corner seemed to echo with memories I couldn't quite shake. Lisa was gone, and with her, the woman I had loved, the woman I thought I knew. The betrayal cut so deep I wondered if I'd ever fully recover. I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I focused on my kids, making sure they felt loved and secure amid the chaos. The court's decision meant I could finally start fresh, but I knew I had to be cautious. Lisa's lies had been so elaborate, so calculated, that I couldn't trust that she was truly out of my life. I had to stay vigilant, especially since the court had also ordered her to pay damages, which she was dragging her feet on. She was bitchy and vindictive to the very end, trying to twist the story to make herself look like the victim, but I refused to be drawn into her games. In the months that followed, I found myself reflecting a lot. I realized how naive I'd been to trust her blindly, how I'd ignored the small signs, her secretive phone habits, her sudden mood swings, her obsession with money. I kept asking myself, how did I miss all this? But then I remembered that love can blind you. I'd been so caught up in trying to make our marriage work, to see the good in her, that I overlooked the warning signs. Now I saw clearly. She was manipulative, selfish, and a compulsive liar. The financial cleanup was a long process. I worked with my lawyer and financial advisors to make sure she couldn't hide any more assets. We traced every dollar, and I filed a lien against her offshore accounts. I also started the process of recovering the stolen money, though I knew some of it was gone forever. Still, I made sure she paid for her crimes, both legally and financially. I wanted her to understand that her actions had consequences, and I was determined not to let her get away with it. One thing that surprised me was how much I'd changed. I'd gone from being a trusting husband to someone hardened by betrayal. I became more cautious, more guarded. I learned to read people better, to spot lies faster. But I also learned something else, how resilient I was. Despite everything, I managed to pick myself up, take control, and fight for what was rightfully mine. That realization gave me a strange sense of pride, even if the pain still lingered. The kids, thankfully, adjusted better than I expected. They missed their mom, of course, but they sensed that something was wrong. I made sure to be honest with them, to tell them that we all make mistakes but that we can move forward. I wanted to shield them from the worst of it, but I also wanted them to know the truth about honesty, trust, and the importance of standing up for yourself. Watching them grow stronger, more resilient, made me feel like I was doing something right, even if the wounds of betrayal still sting. As for Lisa, I heard she was trying to rebuild her life elsewhere, maybe with Jake, maybe with someone new. I didn't care anymore. She had burned that bridge and I was done chasing after her. I realized I deserved better, someone who wouldn't lie, cheat, or steal from me. I started dating again, cautiously, but I refused to let her betrayal define me. It was a hard lesson, but one I had to learn. Looking back now, I see how much I've grown from this nightmare. I've become more aware, more cautious, and definitely more guarded. But I've also become stronger. I know that trust isn't easy anymore and that sometimes people will hurt you in ways you never imagined. But I also know that I'm capable of surviving it. I've faced the worst, betrayal by someone I loved, the loss of money, the shattering of my entire world, and I came out the other side still standing. My biggest takeaway: never ignore the small signs, trust your instincts. And if someone shows you they're not worth it, walk away before they ruin everything. Because at the end of the day, your peace of mind and dignity are what matter most. I may have lost a lot, but I gained clarity, strength, and the knowledge that I can survive even the deepest betrayals. And as hard as it was, I'm finally starting to believe I can rebuild what I lost, better, stronger, and wiser. Now that everything's settled, I spend a lot of time thinking about how I got here and what it all means. It's strange, my life has been turned upside down, but somehow I've come out of it more aware of who I am and what I deserve. The betrayal was brutal. Lisa's lies, her stealing, even her secret affair with Jake, who I recently found out was my half-brother. It all felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But I did, and I see things differently now. I've learned that trust is fragile and sometimes people you love the most can hurt you the worst. That's a hard lesson, but it's one I had to learn the hard way. I also learned that the truth can set you free, even if it's painful at first. Facing everything head-on, gathering evidence, fighting in court, and standing my ground, those were the only ways I could reclaim my life. It wasn't easy. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, nights I doubted whether I'd ever find peace again. But I kept going. The most important thing I realized is that I can't control other people's choices, but I can control how I respond. I can choose to be a victim, to let this destroy me, or I can choose to learn, to grow, and to move forward. I chose the latter. I've started therapy not because I'm weak, but because I want to understand how I let things get so bad and how I can prevent it from happening again. I want to be stronger, not just for myself but for my kids, who are my reason for everything now. As I look ahead, I know there will still be challenges. The scars of betrayal don't just disappear overnight. Trust doesn't come easy anymore, and I have to be cautious about who I let into my life. But I also feel a sense of hope. Hope that someday I'll find someone who genuinely cares, who's honest and loyal. Someone who won't lie, cheat, or steal from me, and who will appreciate the lessons I've learned. The biggest thing I want to share with anyone reading this, if you're in a similar situation, is don't ignore the signs. Don't convince yourself it's just a phase or work stress. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. And if you find yourself betrayed, remember, you're not alone. You can survive this. You can rebuild. It takes time, patience, and sometimes a lot of pain, but you will come out stronger on the other side. Today, I'm finally at peace with what happened. I forgive myself for trusting the wrong person, and I forgive Lisa, because holding on to anger only keeps you trapped. I choose to focus on healing, on protecting my children, and on moving forward. I've learned that life can throw the worst at you, but you have the power to choose how you respond. And I choose to be better, wiser, and more cautious than before. Sometimes the greatest lessons come from the hardest experiences. Betrayal, loss, heartbreak, they all hurt like hell. But they also teach you what truly matters: honesty, integrity, loyalty. And most of all, that your worth isn't defined by someone else's lies or betrayals. It's defined by how you pick yourself up afterward. That's what I'm doing now, standing tall, looking ahead, and knowing that I'm stronger than any betrayal. And I will never let anyone take that away from me again.